The night the moon remembered us.
People like to believe cities are born. They imagine a moment, a flag planted, a name spoken, a foundation stone laid with ceremony and hope. Greyhaven was not born. Greyhaven was allowed. Long before roads crossed the valley, before maps pretended the land was understood, the place already existed in a state that was neither empty nor alive. Travelers passing nearby described the same sensation without ever comparing notes, the feeling of being watched by something patient, something that did not care whether it was noticed. The valley curved inward, subtly but deliberately. Hills leaned toward the center as if listening. The river slowed there, thickened, reflecting the sky with unsettling clarity even on cloudy days. At night, stars above the basin refused to form familiar constellations. They drifted just enough to be wrong. The first people who came here did not stay. The second group stayed too long. The third never left. Their bones are still there, buried beneath streets with friendly names, under cafes, schools, churches, pressed into the earth like punctuation marks in a sentence that never ended. Greyhaven learned to build upward instead of downward. That was its first mistake. When the settlers arrived in force, exhausted, displaced, fleeing disasters history would later forget, they believed the valley was a refuge. Storms drove them there, flooded roads left no other path. Horses refused to turn back once the hills closed behind them. Journals from that first winter spoke of strange peace. Fear vanished. Questions felt unnecessary. They worked with unnatural efficiency, building shelters in precise arrangements without planning sessions, without arguments. Every street faced slightly inward, every street curved even when straight lines would have been easier. No one noticed. Why would they? The dead never complain.
By the second year, digging began. Cellars first, then storage rooms, then tunnels. Men reported striking stone far older than expected, stone etched with shallow grooves that did not resemble tool marks. When lantern light hit the walls just right, the grooves seemed to pulse. 3 diggers disappeared during that time. No cave-ins, no bodies, just absence. Their names were removed from payroll records. Their belongings were distributed quietly. Their families remembered them as having left. Memory was already learning to cooperate. Greyhaven grew, and as it grew, it listened. Centuries passed. The city layered itself like sediment. Wars came and went without ever fully touching it. Plagues skirted its edges. Fires burned selectively, consuming the oldest records while sparing newer lies. Every generation rebuilt the center. Every generation avoided explaining why. They didn't need to. The blood moon explained it for them. The first written mention of it described a moon of rusted light that rose too slowly and left people changed in ways no prayer could unmake. The second record was shorter. The third was just a symbol carved into stone. After that, the city learned a better response: silence. By the time electricity came to Greyhaven, the blood moon had been reframed as folklore. Children learned songs about it. Teenagers planned parties around it. Scientists dismissed it with confident smiles and hollowed charts. But the old neighborhoods never celebrated. They boarded windows. They salted thresholds. They whispered apologies to the ground beneath their feet. 3 weeks before the blood moon's return, the dreams began. They were not nightmares. That was what frightened people most. There was no panic in them, no monsters leaping from shadows, no sudden jolts awake. Just descent. People dreamed of staircases spiraling down into warm darkness,
of stone walls slick with moisture, of distant rhythmic sounds, too slow to be footsteps, too steady to be water. A heartbeat. Sometimes a voice. Not speaking words. Not yet. At first, the dreams were isolated. Then they synchronized. People who had never met described the same turns, the same carvings, the same sensation of being expected. Online forums filled with quiet confusion before moderators shut them down to prevent hysteria. Doctors blamed stress. Neurologists blamed interference. No one blamed the moon, not publicly. Animals noticed first. Pets refused to enter basements. Livestock panicked at night. Birds vanished in stages, migrating too early, then all at once. The city's stray cats disappeared entirely within a week, leaving behind torn trash bags and silence. Even insects thinned. The city grew hollow. 7 days before the blood moon, the archive burned. Not the whole building, just the lowest floor. Firefighters reported the flames behaved incorrectly, burning downward, consuming stone shelving, leaving paper untouched on higher levels. When the fire was finally extinguished, investigators found the walls beneath the damage covered in carvings no one remembered commissioning. They were old, older than the city, older than language. The night before the blood moon, the moon did not set. It hovered just above the hills, swollen and pale, like something held in place by invisible hands. People stood at windows long past midnight, watching it without understanding why they could not look away. Phones buzzed. Emergency alerts flickered and vanished. Church bells rang once, only once, then stopped. At 9:47 p.m. the next evening, the power failed. Not gradually, instantly. Greyhaven fell into a darkness so complete it felt physical, like pressure against the eyes. Then, slowly, gently, the blood moon began to rise, and when its light touched the city, something deep beneath Greyhaven opened its eyes. The blood moon did not glow. It did not shine or gleam or cast light the way the moon was supposed to. What it did instead was expose. It peeled back the thin skin of night and revealed what had always been there, waiting patiently beneath appearances. Under its presence, Greyhaven felt suddenly intimate, too close, too narrow, like a room with the doors locked from the outside. At first, nothing dramatic happened. No screams, no fires, no collapse. That was the cruelest part. People stood at their windows, in doorways, on balconies, staring upward with a quiet sense of recognition they could not explain. The blood moon hung low and heavy, its surface darkened as if stained from within. Veins seemed to run across it, pulsing slowly, in time with something far below the city. A man in the northern district dropped his keys. He bent to pick them up and froze, overcome by the sudden certainty that the pavement beneath him was thinner than it should be, that if he pressed his ear to the ground, he would hear something breathing back. A woman downtown began to cry, not out of fear, but relief. She later said she felt like she had finally remembered something important she had forgotten as a child. Across Greyhaven, people began stepping outside, not rushing, not panicking, walking calmly into the streets as if responding to a familiar call. The first whispers began in the old quarter. They slipped between buildings, brushing against brick and stone, threading through alleys too narrow for cars. They were soft, overlapping, impossible to trace to any single mouth. Not words yet, just sound. The kind that vibrates behind the eyes and makes teeth ache. Those who heard it felt pressure bloom at the base of their skulls. Memories surfaced, childhood homes that did not exist, rituals never taught, names that tasted ancient on the tongue. Some resisted. They shut doors, covered ears, prayed loudly. The pressure increased.
Veins throbbed, vision blurred, thoughts stretched thin like fabric pulled too hard. People screamed as something inside them pulled forward, demanding space. Others stopped resisting. Their breathing slowed. Their posture straightened. Their eyes reflected the blood moon too clearly. The chanting began as a murmur. It was not synchronized at first. Each voice followed its own rhythm, its own phrasing, but gradually they aligned. Cadence emerged, harmony formed. The words were not spoken to the moon, they were spoken with it, as if the city itself had become an instrument and the blood moon was finally playing it correctly. The streets began to change, not abruptly, gently. A corner curved a little more sharply than it had before. A dead end opened into a narrow stairway where no stairway had ever been. Old buildings shed their newer facades like molted skin, revealing stonework etched with spirals, eyes, and symbols that hurt to focus on for too long. Streetlights flickered back on, not electric, not powered, but glowing faintly red, fueled by nothing visible. Shadows stretched in directions that did not match their sources, and still the people walked. Those not yet touched barricaded themselves indoors. They watched through curtains as neighbors passed below. Faces slack with devotion were twisted in quiet ecstasy. Some mouthed words silently, practicing something they were not yet allowed to speak aloud. Emergency broadcasts attempted to resume. They failed. Every channel collapsed into the same sound, a low-frequency hum layered with distant chanting. Those who listened too long reported hearing their own names woven into the noise. Beneath Greyhaven, the tunnels awakened. Seals placed centuries ago cracked open with sounds like breaking bones. Rusted doors fell inward. Staircases spiraled deeper than maps allowed for. The earth shifted, not violently, but deliberately, aligning corridors, clearing paths, preparing for movement, for return. In the central square, the statue began to bleed. At first, it looked like rainwater running down its surface. Then someone screamed as the liquid darkened, thickened, dripping onto the stone below with wet, meaty sounds. The tablet clutched in the statue's hands vibrated. Hairline fractures appeared along its surface, glowing faintly red. The chanting swelled. People gathered around the monument in widening circles, bodies arranged with unconscious precision. They swayed as one, heads tilted upward, mouths open. Some cried, some laughed, some whispered apologies to something they could not see. A child tried to run. He broke free from his mother's grip, darting between bodies, sobbing in terror as the chanting grew louder behind him. He made it 3 blocks before the street folded inward, narrowing until he found himself standing at the edge of a stairway, descending straight down into darkness. He stopped screaming. He tilted his head, and he stepped forward. At the height of the blood moon, the statue split open. Stone peeled away, revealing flesh beneath, pale, veined, impossibly old. The tablet shattered, releasing a sound like a bell rung underwater, echoing down into the city's bones. The ground collapsed. The square caved inward, not chaotically, but cleanly, as if designed to do so. People fell, not screaming, not resisting, descending into the revealed chamber below. Those who followed walked calmly to the edge and stepped off without hesitation. The chamber beneath Greyhaven was vast. Its walls were carved from living rock, etched with scenes of humanity kneeling, offering, being unmade. Chains thicker than buildings wrapped around something enormous at its center. It breathed, slowly, deeply. Each breath pulled air from the surface, dragging scent, sound, memory downward. When the eye opened, It was not an eye in any human sense. It was an aperture, an opening into a depth of awareness so vast it crushed thought. Those who looked into it understood. Greyhaven was never a city, it was a lock, and the blood moon was the key. The chanting reached its peak. The final words were spoken. The true name of the city echoed through stone and flesh alike, and the chains began to break.
The chains broke slowly, not with a sound like metal snapping, not with a crash. They unraveled like threads pulled from a tapestry, silently, invisibly. And yet every person in Greyhaven felt it, a tug at the mind, a pulse through the bones, as if something vast had been held back and now finally exhaled. Reality wavered. Windows showed streets that had never existed. Doors opened into hallways that stretched into the stone itself. Shadows moved independently of their owners, sometimes lingering to watch, sometimes twisting into shapes remembered from dreams no one dared recount aloud. People fell to their knees across the city. Some laughed, some wept. Others, already gone, simply raised their faces to the blood moon, and in doing so, became conduits. The moonlight was no longer just light. It was liquid, flowing into minds, softening walls between thought and memory, past and present. It carried voices, ancient voices, layered voices, voices that whispered instructions too subtle to resist. A man in the northern district suddenly recited words in a language no one had taught him, carving patterns into his skin with a shard of metal, as though following a ritual remembered before birth. His neighbors stood silently, obedient, waiting for him to finish before stepping forward to continue the pattern themselves. The city itself began to move, not as if lifted by machines or explosions. It bent, it shifted. Streets narrowed, buildings leaned inward, the central square descended deeper into the earth, pulling surrounding blocks with it. Survivors who tried to flee found themselves walking in circles, the same corner repeated again and again. Alleys opened only to spit them out in entirely different districts. Maps, GPS, even memory failed. Greyhaven had always known its inhabitants, and it was not allowing escape. The chanting grew louder. It had no rhythm. It had every rhythm. It contained every voice, every tone, every lament, every pleasure ever spoken beneath the blood moon's gaze. And yet it was coherent. It was understood by those who listened too long. Some died instantly. Their minds could not process infinity. Others survived, but no longer as themselves. Their bodies remained, but their memories were rewritten. Their language shifted, new words replacing old customs replaced by obedience, a slow, deliberate preparation for what was coming. The first full emergence happened near the river. People there had been barricading themselves for hours, listening as the world around them bent. Their radios emitted only static. Lights flickered and went out entirely. Windows bulged inward as if breathing. And then they appeared, the ones who had succumbed first, emerging from the darkness between buildings, faces serene, eyes too bright, chanting the city's true name over and over. The barricaded survivors tried to resist, to reason, to hide. It did not matter. A hand on the wall, a whisper at the ear, a gaze too long in the blood moon's reflection, enough to draw them out. One by one, they joined the procession. The tunnels beneath Greyhaven were no longer subterranean. They had become arteries, pulsing with something alive. The chains at the chamber's center were fully broken. The entity beneath breathed more freely, each exhale sending ripples upward, bending streets, twisting minds, aligning everything toward its will. From the surface, Greyhaven seemed familiar, only to those who had forgotten, only to those still tethered to their previous reality. For the possessed, it was home. For the survivors, it was a nightmare stitched from reality itself. The city was singing, pulsing, moving. Its song contained instructions, and humanity was learning them whether it wanted to or not.
A woman in the southern district saw her neighbors climb the walls, literally, scaling brick like it was soft earth, walking sideways along facades, disappearing into stairways that appeared only under the blood moon's gaze. She tried to flee. Her legs moved normally, but the city's song tugged at her consciousness. Every thought she tried to focus on was pulled into compliance. Fear became irrelevant. Curiosity became a guide. Eventually, she too began walking into stairways, into corridors, into darkness. The surface was emptying, but Greyhaven was not finished yet. At the central chamber, the entity shifted. It did not fully rise, not yet, but the pulse of its awareness now touched the surface in waves. It flowed into minds like a tide. Individuality melted under its weight. People began speaking in unison, not because they wanted to, but because they could not stop themselves. The blood moon overhead grew darker, its veins glowing faintly, like blood running through glass. The first full collapse of a human mind occurred just as the moon reached its zenith. A man in a high-rise office had been watching from a window. He understood what he was seeing. He screamed, a sound so primal it vibrated through bone. Then his eyes rolled back, and he spoke the entity's name aloud, not as a name, but as a command. And his colleagues, hearing it, froze, then repeated it. One word became 10, 10 became hundreds, hundreds became one, and the blood moon pulsed in response.
The city's song became unbearable. Not for the entity, not for the possessed, only for those still tethered to their human minds. Some tried to hide. They barricaded themselves in basements. They pressed their faces into the floor, hoping to escape sound. The tunnels beneath them pulsed, shaking the foundation. Walls opened where there should have been none. Light came from nowhere. Shadows shifted into impossible shapes. They screamed. They tried to resist. They failed. The first of the city's landmarks folded into the chamber. The old library, its foundations centuries old, tilted, then slowly descended as if being swallowed by the earth. Books flew from shelves, pages glowing faintly in the blood moon's red light. Knowledge spilled into the entity's awareness, centuries of thought, study, belief, all consumed and rearranged. Survivors outside were too late to understand. By dawn, Greyhaven was half collapsed, half transformed, and the remaining inhabitants, few as they were, walked in ways that made sense only to the blood moon. The first survivors to reach the edge of the city reported seeing lights in impossible angles, streets bending like water, people walking on walls as if gravity had been rewritten. Greyhaven was alive. Greyhaven was aware, and it was hungry. The survivors barely understood the city anymore. Greyhaven had become something alive, something deliberate, something older than thought. Streets twisted, buildings leaned at impossible angles, shadows crawled along walls like liquid. The wind carried low hums that vibrated inside bone, inside mind, inside memory. Every breath of air tasted of iron and ash and something far, far older. People tried to flee. It was pointless. Every movement they made brought them closer to the entity. Every turn led them inward toward the city's center. Greyhaven had learned their roots, their habits, their hopes. It anticipated every footstep, every hesitation, every thought. And it was patient. The
The blood moon pulsed overhead. Not in light, not in heat, but in rhythm, like a heartbeat shared with the city itself. At its peak, the veins across its surface glowed bright red, brighter than fire, darker than shadow. They pulsed in time with something beneath the streets, and everyone in the city, possessed and survivor alike, felt it. The entity had awakened. The central chamber had grown. No longer just a room, no longer just a pit. It was an expanse, a cathedral carved from living stone, etched with images of humanity kneeling, offering, unmaking itself, repeating endlessly. Chains, once thick enough to hold continents, now lay broken, coiled along the edges of the chamber like serpents at rest. The eye opened fully this time. Not human, not animal, not even fully recognizable, but alive. Its gaze did not sweep the city. It entered it. Every thought, every heartbeat, every memory. It did not judge. It did not hate. It simply reclaimed what had been promised to it.
The first complete possession occurred in the central square. The man who had resisted longest finally fell to his knees, gasping. His skin paled unnaturally, veins darkened beneath his surface. His eyes, bright and clear for the first time, reflected not the moon, but the entity itself. He rose, and he began to chant. Not words humans understood, not syllables meant to be spoken. Yet everyone who heard it obeyed. Slowly, quietly, the citizens joined. First in whispers, then in louder tones, until the city itself seemed to breathe with the sound. Buildings pulsed with each chant, windows vibrated, roofs shivered, stone walls grew faintly warm. Greyhaven was alive. Greyhaven was awake. Greyhaven was hungry. Outside the central square, survivors wandered aimlessly. Some ran, then doubled back. Some tried to hide, pressing faces into floors or burying themselves beneath furniture. Some screamed into voids where voices answered, whispering the city's true name. A woman found herself drawn to a staircase that had never existed before. She knew, instinctively, that it led down. Her legs moved of their own accord. Step by step, she descended, and the city shifted beneath her. The staircase stretched longer than it should have. Walls curved, shadows lengthened and deepened. Below, in the tunnels, the entity's presence pressed closer. Its awareness was everywhere now. It did not need to move. It was movement. The survivors in the northern district watched in horror as the streets folded upon themselves. Cars toppled into nothingness. Streetlights leaned inward and snapped, sparks flying like stars being born and dying in a single instant. Windows opened to stairways descending into black stone. People climbed walls, walked ceilings, moved with grace that made no sense. All the while, the chanting continued. The moon pulsed, and the city shifted. Always in rhythm, always in alignment with the entity's will. One man realized too late what had happened. He had been running for hours, navigating streets that no longer existed on any map. His apartment, his workplace, his childhood home, they all twisted into a labyrinth beyond comprehension. The air thickened, his thoughts slowed, memories warped. He tried to scream, but no sound came. And then he saw it. A column of shadow in the square, moving upward from the pit beneath the city. The figure was immense, taller than any building, its limbs stretching and folding in impossible ways. Its head opened, revealing the fully awakened eye. It blinked once, and the world convulsed in recognition. He understood. This was not a monster. This was Greyhaven itself. The moon reached its zenith. Veins of red light streamed down, connecting the sky to the city to the tunnels to the entity below. Every sound became part of the chant. Every breath became part of the pulse. Every heartbeat synchronized. The entity rose, not physically, but in awareness. Its presence now permeated every building, every brick, every shadow, every living mind. The people, some resisting, most compliant, were now instruments, channels for its consciousness. The final collapse began. Survivors could no longer distinguish reality from hallucination. Some saw entire neighborhoods fold into themselves like paper, only to reappear elsewhere. Others saw their neighbors twist into impossible shapes, human yet wrong, chanting the city's true name as their mouths stretched unnaturally wide. Even the river itself seemed to climb walls, flow backward, then evaporate into the stone beneath. The entity did not move, yet it was everywhere. Every thought, every memory, every fear, every hope, every dream, all of it claimed.
And then the city was silent. Not peaceful, not empty. Silent as something watching. The blood moon hung high, veins glowing, pulsing in slow, deliberate rhythm. The city's song had ceased only because it was no longer needed. The entity's will had been fully realized. Greyhaven no longer belonged to its citizens. It had always belonged to this. A few survivors remained, scattered and broken. They hid, they cowered, they whispered to one another, but even whispers were drawn into the city's pulse. No thought was private, no memory safe. One by one they succumbed. Some fell silently, some screamed, some smiled, knowing they were part of something older, larger, inevitable. The blood moon began to descend. Its light no longer illuminated, it claimed. And as it faded, the city stood transformed, alive in ways no one could describe, fully aware, fully hungry, fully remembered.
Dawn came. Not a sunrise, not light spilling over the hills. Dawn was thin. It was weak, as if the world had forgotten how to begin again. The blood moon had descended behind the western ridge, leaving only a faint crimson haze across the sky. Greyhaven stood, but it was no longer the city people remembered. Its streets had shifted. Its buildings leaned at impossible angles. Its shadows were alive. The river flowed backward in places, black as tar, and beneath it all, the entity rested, no longer needing the surface to move. It was the surface. A few humans survived, few enough that their existence seemed accidental, a glitch in a system designed for total reclamation. They wandered the broken streets, trying to remember what was real. They could not. They could remember fear, and that was all. The survivors stumbled upon remnants of the possessed. Some were still upright, eyes empty yet focused, chanting silently under their breath. Others had merged with the city itself, walls twisted around them, doors fused with limbs, faces appearing in stone and brick. No one could tell where human ended and Greyhaven began. One man found himself in what had been a library. The books were gone. The shelves had shifted upward, becoming a staircase that led down into darkness. He descended, knowing he would find the eye. And he did. The chamber was quiet now, only the slow, measured pulse of the entity. The eye blinked once, and in that instant he understood all things. Not everything, not knowledge, but the rules. The city, the tunnels, the blood moon, the people, they were part of a system older than humanity, a system that did not tolerate resistance, a system that waited, patiently, for the right moment.
Outside, the city whispered. Even the remaining humans could hear it. The streets breathed. Pavement cracked just enough to suggest movement beneath. Windows gleamed with a light that was not sunlight. The air vibrated, carrying voices in a language no one had learned, yet everyone understood. Some tried to leave. They followed roads they had memorized, but every turn led them back. Every alley curved unnaturally. Greyhaven would not let them go. It never had. It had waited for the blood moon to remind it who controlled the city. In the final hours, as the crimson haze faded, the survivors gathered at the edge of the old square. The statue, the founder, the tablet, the chains was gone. Only a shadow remained. The ground beneath pulsed in time with the entity below. A whisper emerged from the city itself. "You are remembered." It was not spoken aloud, not a voice, not a sound. It was imprinted directly into thought, into memory, into the marrow. The survivors fell to their knees. Some wept, some laughed, some simply stared. They understood one immutable truth. Greyhaven had always been waiting, and now it was awake.
The blood moon returned to the sky, not in its former red, but in darkness edged with veins of light. Its presence remained, patient, eternal. It had fed, it had awakened, it had remembered. And somewhere, in another valley, another city stirred. The moon would rise again, the chains would tighten, the pulse would return, humanity would forget, and it would begin again. Somewhere far above, the stars aligned wrong. A city breathed, a moon pulsed, and the world whispered, "It remembers." The silence after that was complete, not peaceful, not forgiving, not human, just waiting.